Alright, anyways. So that's how our last day's going. No. So I'm gonna leave my story very brief, and then I really just want to talk about the growth of the company because, right, like I think the only reason why I can tell this story is because like I genuinely have finally shifted my mentality over the last couple of years from a victim of my past to now like a victor. And the only reason why I say that is because like I didn't come from very like I didn't have the ingredients to be an entrepreneur. So if you haven't met me, my name is Danny. I've been running this office at Raleigh location, North Carolina for about 2 years now. 2 years in February. Before this, I'm 22 years old, first gen American for my family. Grew up in Mexico for a little bit and moved over here to the States when my sister was born. But honestly, I went to 17 different elementaries. I moved around a lot. My dad did roofing at the time, so it's like wherever the natural disaster was, that's where we went for work. So I moved around a lot. I lived in Pensacola, all over Florida, San Antonio, tons of places, right? And so you had to get really good at making friends. Like it was like, you know, I was like 2 nose in to go. I kind of learned that in like preschool, I guess you could say. CPR was my best friend. And so for me, it was always a constant like move. So it's like I had to become really numb to like building relationships. So that was really my big struggle when I came to the business because I was like, well, I don't have to like this person. I'm gonna not see them in 3 months, right? And I feel like sometimes we say that it's like, hey, why build this person? They're gonna quit in like a week. I definitely was prone to that, and so grew up really poor. Shared one room, like literally like one room. It was like the size of Asani's office right now, and it was 6 family members till I was like 15, and so it's like, oh god, it was a lot of body heat. Let's just say a lot of oxygen in that room, and so. We're like sardines in there, and I didn't take my first hot shower until I was about 16. I didn't know shower heads existed until I was about like 15, 14, because in Mexico, I always talk about the story, like perspective was a big thing for me because in Mexico, like you had anybody ever been to Mexico? Raise your hand if you've been to Mexico. Okay, what about the ghetto part of Mexico? Okay, a lot of hands go down. Yeah. Anyone visiting that for fun? So, anyways, I don't know what it is. Something to do with where it is, but Mexico is like it gets really. The sun comes up really early, like 6:15 max. Y'all with me there? And so, what you got? Is that a cold one? What you got? So, not having shoes growing up was a big thing because if you wanted water for the day. Right, we would have to carry like these canteens, right? And you had to wake up really early because if not, it would be too scorching on the gravel to like where your feet would like genuinely have like, what was it like, blisters from the heat. So me and my brothers used to like race there, race back, and I'll talk about that story of like perspective at a different time. And so for me, it was always like go, like put your head down, just do the task that's next, right? And when my sister was finally born, that kind of shifted a lot of my family's perspective from like being poor to being less poor. So we moved to San Antonio, finally got my first ever house. I discovered what carpet was that time, like a 2-story house in carpet. It was fire. I slept on the floor because I loved the carpet so much for about 2 weeks. And so I was never a material person, right? And when people see me, I forget they don't see that person because for me, it's still that guy that was like eating chicken nuggets off the floor in 2nd grade because I really wanted to try what McDonald's was. And people are like, well, Danny, you just have a maid. I'm like, bruh, only you knew. And so around 15, my dad owned his own business. He went from like mopping up oil at a mechanic shop to owning the actual business. Huge success story there. But I guess like when you get something, if you don't have the right skill set, like when you enter a responsibility or a role that you're really not ready for, like, can we agree? It's pretty crazy. I heard the statistic that like, you have more likelihood of entering depression and getting in debt when you win the lottery. And that's a crazy statistic to me, all right? And so it's like, if you made the exact same money running a business, you would have more likelihood of becoming a millionaire. And it's because like sometimes you need the skill set way before you need the results. And for me, it was a lot like that. Like I was so head down to get the task done, to get the result, that I was never trying to build a skill set while doing it. I was just like, bro, you just need to run. Like you just need to run through life as fast as possible. And so my dad kind of entered that realm too because he got the shop, made great money. I think he was making over around 250K, but he was spending 260, like on gambling, drugs, all this other stuff. My dad was an alcoholic, so you know what's worse than being broke? It's seeing the money and seeing it leave just as fast. Like that's annoying. Like, let's just say, definitely a tease there. And so, my dad always had a terrible relationship with money. So immediately I had a terrible relationship with money, right? Duplication. And so when I joined the business, I joined it right after college. So I graduated from high school, 7th in my class, full ride scholarship for cross country and track, and I wanted to go for civil engineering. And people are like, "Oh, that sounds so smart." I literally just Googled, "Hey, what's the highest paying job in Texas?" And it said civil engineering. I was like, "Done, I'll do that." Does that make sense? I was like, I was really doctor, but I was like, not doing that, right? So then I went to the third one. And so did that, and then if you don't know, in order to get like your civil engineering license, you have to go to school, get your bachelor's, then shadow an engineer for about 2 years, then qualify to take a PE exam, which is a fundamentals of engineering exam. Then you get a license to practice under an engineer for 2 years. Then you can finally start practicing yourself, right? So you're like 45 when you stop becoming like a W-4 slave to someone else. And so right when I got out of college, the pandemic hit. Right, and the pandemic hit, and like, anybody remember the pandemic? Anybody remember like exactly where you were when like Tom Hanks got COVID? Like, I feel like that's when it got real. When Tom Hanks got COVID, everyone was like, "Fuck, it's real," right? So when I remember exactly where I was, right? It was spring break of 2020. Spring break of 2020 or 2021.
2019.
That was 2020. That was spring break of 2020. That's where I was. And so I was on my way home. I was on my way home from spring break, and I was like, "Yes, I'm done." But I was gonna come back to do graduation, do all that stuff, and so I have a duffel bag, and I got a text saying, "Hey, your spring break's been elongated by a week because of COVID." Blah blah blah. I'm like, "Cool, yes, no school." And then that Monday, they're like, "Hey, school's out." I was like, the first thing that went through my mind, I don't know what y'all thought about, but the first thing that went through my mind is, I was like, "Shit, I left all my shoes." And they didn't let us, like, it was March. They didn't let us get our clothes back from our dorm until July. And I was like, "Bro, I really need my sneakers." Like, it was like, I needed my sneakers. I was a sneakerhead back then. And so it was like, COVID completely changed my entire life. Like, any of y'all know people that are still like recovering from COVID? Anybody know? I still working, like, I'm just looking for a job, COVID really, I'm like, bro, what? Yeah. Okay, I just really want to, like, I think COVID is the best or the worst thing that's ever happened to people. And let me tell you why. For me, it was the best thing. It turned out to be the worst at first. It will always be the worst at first, because now I was in my 2 years of internship. I was working at the Toyota Center. They were creating like the electric Tundra at the time. Probably can't say that.
I mean, is it out?
It's not now. I definitely signed an NDA.
On camera.
Just put that part out.
Edit that.
Next thing. We'll edit that part out. Yeah. So anyways, right when I did that, I get an email as soon as COVID said that the rest of the year was gone. I get an email from my civil engineering internship, and they're like, "Hey, we're actually going on a job freeze, and we're actually laying off 2% of our bottom line. So your secure job is actually gone." And it was a way lengthier, way sexier email, but that's all I read, right? And I looked at my mom, and she was like, "What?" And I was like, "I have no clue what I'm about to do." So there I was, after like 19 years, 20 years of life, and I'm like, I feel like everything I've done just went down the hole because of COVID. And so immediately I was like, what the hell I'm gonna be a loser. I am going to be 45 living with my parents. And like I immediately had a midlife crisis, like, what the hell am I going to do? And so my best friend at the time was doing sales, and I was like, "Bro, like, how much money are you making?" He's like, "Bro, I'm making $950 a week, bi-weekly." And I'm like, "Yes, that's exactly what I need." Literally, that's how that conversation went. And then he's like, "What are you doing?" He's like, I'm selling, he was selling ADT alarm systems.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, "Yeah, bro, I do phone calls." He's like, "It's really easy. You just have to do 200 calls a day." I'm like, "Bro, you just call?" He's like, "That sounds easy." So I applied to a lot of jobs, and I was like, "You know what? Let me just keep trying for engineering, because I really like engineering." And I'm like, "You know what? This may be God's time that I need to switch from civil engineering to mechanical engineering." Somehow I justified that in my head. So I applied for mechanical engineering, but when I hit mechanical engineering on Indeed, I accidentally hit marketing. Accidentally. And then I get a call and they're like, hey, you want to come in for this first round? And I'm like, ain't no one else calling. So I do it, and I was gonna skip it because they're like marketing, blah blah blah. She was super nice, and they're like, "What's the job about?" I'm like, "I don't know." She sounded really happy through the phone. They're like, they read my resume. They said I'd be great for manager position. I think I'm a manager, right? And so I get into my first round. And I'll never forget. This was a deciding factor. Keep in mind, my internship just went down the hole. And this guy, his name's Chris Delosier, he's a program manager right now for a certain program. He goes, hey, this is not he's like, hey guys, my name's Chris. I'll be conducting y'all's interview today. It was a group Zoom, right? And me, I was like, holy shit, it's a group Zoom. So I turn off my camera. And then I look back, and it says, let me tell you the 3 flags that were decorated in my room. Saturdays are for the boys. A Corona flag, and a full send. I was like, I just don't think that is professional. So I yank them all off and I turn it back on and I'm like, and he's like, Danny? I'm like, present? He's like, I'm not taking roll call. He's like, I just need you to answer the questions. I'm like, if someone didn't hear the questions, what would they say? And he's like, you mean repeat the question? And I was like, yeah. So he repeats the questions. He's like, well, this is not an intern. He's like, so I answered the question and I was like, blah blah blah, and I mentioned the word internship. And he's like, hey, this is not an internship. He's like, if you want an internship, raise your hand. And I was like, I don't want a fucking internship again. Right? Just to go away. So 2 girls, one guy, 1 girl, raise their hand. He kicks them out. He's like, this is not an internship. We're looking for full-time positions. And dude, if you've done first rounds now, you know that is not the way to do a first round. But for me, I don't know why. For me, I was like, yes, yes. I like this guy. So I sat up and I took the most notes I've ever taken. In my entire college career, I took more notes in that 45-minute interview where I only answered 2 questions, and that was it. And then I get off and mom's like, what was the job about? I'm like, fuck, I forgot to ask. Damn it. And then I was like, I'll ask next round. And they wanted me to go all the way to San Antonio, but it was exactly at the time, it was like the window that we had to get all of our clothes. So I was like, I can't make it. They're like, yeah, you gotta make it. I'm like, I can't, blah, blah, blah. So I did my second round over Zoom. And hated the guy that interviewed me. Hated it. Some of you are like, oh yes, my upline. Me, I was like, fuck. That dude, he had a Tom and Jerry tattoo right here. His name was Daniel. Love him to this day. Great dude, but off the rip, he did his second round. He turns on the camera. He's in his car, and there's a pizza box between the headrest. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Sorry for my language, guys, by the way. But I'm like, I'm like, whatever. And so I'm like, I wasted my time. So I half-assed the interview, and I get a call from Cheng, and she's like, hey, saw you just interviewed with the company, super excited to have you. I actually don't want you to take the job yet, I want you to think about it. And I was like, I wasn't gonna take it, but why do I need to think about it? I don't need to think about it, I want it. And she's like, no, I want you to think about it. Call me in 3 weeks when you get to San Antonio, maybe we'll have lunch. I'm like, who are you? She's like, Cheng. I'm like, Cheng. I'm like, Cheng? I said, Cheng. I was like, I don't know what Cheng, because I was looking at the website. She's like, oh, it's pronounced, it's spelled Trang. I'm like, are you the CEO? She's like, yeah. She's like, I don't tell anyone though, shh. And hangs up. And I was like, that was the coolest CEO. I'm like, I worked at Chick-fil-A before this. That was my previous job before that. I'm like, I did it. I ain't see the Chick-fil-A CEO taking orders with me. And so I was like, I gotta have this lunch with this lady. So I was like, you know what? And then I go, I'm like, fuck, like I didn't want this job. What made me want it so bad now? I was like, you know what? I don't want this job, but I do. So I get there, and she texts me, she's like, hey, no worries. She's like, I know you just got back into town. And I was like literally pulling up to my house. I'm like, where is she at? Like, and so I was like, okay, cool, let's do that. And so I get lunch with her, and she's like, you know what? Sorry, we can do lunch, or we can just meet up in my office. I want to give you some papers to look over about the business. I'm like, you know what? I want to see the office. So she's like, come in at 10:07. And I'm like, 10:07. She's like, yeah, 10:07. Okay, 10:07. Right? And so back then, their IMO started at 10. Okay, I came from a civil engineering cubicle, recycled air, do your job, shut up, don't talk to anyone until your efficiency is at 99.8%. Right? Like you can't piss more than 3 times in your shift. Okay, like they're like, hey, can we get a water system in your sewage? And they're like, no, because it's gonna make you need to pee. Okay. Usually that's what my body needs, but okay. And then I go in at 10:07 and I see this zoo. And I just see 60 cats just like practice pitching. And I'm like, bro, what? This is illegal. I'm like, this right here, it has to be illegal. Yeah. And then I see Ching's hand like raised from the back of the office. She's like, I'm over here. And I walk through and everyone is like, good morning, how are you? And I get like 25 handshakes. Bro, I feel like I was walking down the goddamn red carpet. and I walk into Ching's office. She's like, here's a packet. Here's what we want to do. She's like, let me know which part you'd want to know more about if you want the job. So you're good to go. And I looked at this packet and it breaks down the numbers. It's the what we expect packet. And I looked through it and everything made sense immediately. And I was like, cool. And Mom was like, what's the job? And I'm like, shit. Damn it. I was like, I'll ask you an orientation. And back then orientation was 3 days. So I did the 3 day of orientation. And the second day you had to pitch in front of the class. Right? So the first day they're like, hey, make sure you study the pitch because you're going to come back and pitch it tomorrow. So I'm like, okay, cool. So I studied the pitch, learned it, did everything. And I go back and they're like, all right, go. And like, there was 14 people in our class. And they go and this girl's like,
I didn't quite catch that.
I said, I went home and studied. Right? And so I learned the pitch and this first person comes up and she's like, I didn't study. I looked at her like, what the fuck you mean you didn't study? She said to study. And then this other person's like, oh good, I'm not the only one who didn't study. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, you didn't study. She said to study. So I'm like, damn it, everyone's gonna hate me now. I'm the one who studied. So I go up there and I do the pitch. And like, I'm like, I keep going and I close them back then it was water. So I go all the way to the credit card page and she's like, I only needed the pitch. And I'm like, don't you make your money on the credit card? She's like, yeah. I'm like, cool. Right, and so I sit down and I'm like, wow. And so immediately orientation for me was like, I didn't talk my first 4 days, but besides the pitch. Right, I was a super shy dude at the time. I don't know why, but I was like super shy because I was like, this is my first big boy job in a whole different field that wasn't civil engineering. So for the first time, again, I was bad at something. So like, just to give you context in my head, I was D1 in cross country and track, qualified for the Junior Olympics, was 7th in my class. Like academics and sports, they were not hard to me. Like it was just something like I naturally just had to do. So like to be in marketing, I was like, I don't know shit about marketing. Like I'm like, yes, I'm finally bad at something. And so my 5th day in Cheng's office in San Antonio, right? She's a regional consultant right now. She has 60 locations that she oversees. I go and I see this guy finish a training program. And then I see his name and his city pop up on the tracker. And then I still remember the what we expect that because I have like partial photographic memory. And I'm like, okay, so it's $127 per water sale. This guy just did 300 sales last week. I'm like, okay, that's $34,000 with payroll, taxes. This guy just made $15,000. This dude trained me and made 3 sales my first day, and that was only $300. Now he's making 15. I'm like, Cheng. I'm like, Cheng, I was like, Cheng, you can make really good money out of here. She's like, yeah. I'm like, cool. What do I gotta do? Right, and so the program kind of I got through the 6 months of training program in about 4.5 months. I met Richard along the way. Me and Richard just vibed on if you've met Richard, you probably have met me. If you met me, you probably met Richard, because I kind of just completely embodied his whole entire persona. And so I moved to Dallas, moved entire my family. Now the kind of the trials I had going through the training program, my family hated the job. So they asked me what I did, and when I found out it was door to door, I didn't care. But I also knew my family would. Yeah. Right? I was like, any of y'all Hispanics or international families? Okay, cool. We all know, and it's mostly just with like international families that want to really succeed. That's why they came to the country. And they're like, what do you have to do after high school? Join the army, go to college, right? Apply for jobs, and then go and work for 40 hours. And for Latino families, it's like, hey, like you graduate from high school and then you go and you get pregnant. And for guys, it's like, hey, you graduate high school, you get a good working job, and you go and get a girl pregnant 6 times. And like try for it to be the same girl. Genuinely, that's what it is, right? And I'm like, I do not want to have a kid while I'm a kid. My parents had me at 16, and my parents were late to pick me up because they were in detention. Like let me just run that through a thought. Okay, so wow, that's a true story, by the way, not exaggerating. And so going through the training program, I was like, I hid it from my family all through San Antonio. I think all they saw was I would leave in a suit, and they were asleep by the time I got back. It's like, what do you do? And I'm like, well, I'm in an entry-level training program where in 6 months' time I can go ahead and move up to a branch manager position. They're like, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, I'm in a management and training program where I'm going through the entry level. So, and eventually I'll make it to a branch manager position. She's like, so what do you do? I'm like, so I'm in a management and training program. And so she's like, okay, maybe I just don't get it. I'm like, yeah. And so the day she found out, I was knocking in San Antonio, and I knock on a door. And I'm like, bro, this neighborhood looks so familiar. And the door opens, and I'm like, fuck. And my tia was looking at me. And I saw her see me see her. And I look at my trainee, and I'm like, she's like, you know her? I'm like, yeah. That's she's most at Thea right there. Oh. So I sell her immediately, right? And I swear, like, the door hadn't even closed and my phone was ringing. And I look at it, and it says, Mom. I'm like, shit. So I look at my trainee, I'm like, hey bro, you got this next door. I open it, and I'm like, ooh. I was like, you sound mad, we'll talk later. And she's like, I'm not gonna have no civil engineering, so I'm going door to door, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you better quit right now. I don't care, get your ass home, all that stuff. And I'm like, whoa, Jamal. So I was like, she's texting me the entire day, and I completely lose my attitude. We don't make any more sales. And I get home, and all my stuff's on the curb. House is completely locked out. She changed the locks. At the time, we had a code, right? So the code had changed, and no one was answering the door. And immediately what went through my head was, shit, I left my sneakers in there. Right? And so, no, what immediately went through my head was like, how fast can I see my sister? So I was homeless for the next 3 weeks. Lived in my car, residentially flexible, and I never wanted a pity party. So I wanted to save gas, so I'd sleep at the office, and I would wake up. I knew Chain got there at 6:15, so I'd wake up at 6:05, do whatever I gotta do. Right? Oh, I'd wake up really at 5:45, go back, brush my teeth at the Planet Fitness gym. I'd make fake emails, shower there, and that way I could get the free trial press struggle meals, right? Struggle days, and I would get toothpaste from a locker that was open. It was like always open, and I would just steal his toothpaste. I'll never forget. It was such trash toothpaste too.
That person was probably like,
my breath pump. Yeah. This guy was like, why does my breath smell? And it's like, we're using the same toothbrush. And so bad. And so what you got? One day I overslept. And Chang saw me, but she didn't say anything. And I'm like, fuck, did she see me? And so she goes through the whole day, and right before car rides, she's like, hey Danny, right after cars, can you come back into my office? I'm like, yeah, for sure, no problem. I'm like, I get to stay back. What's up? You suck. And so I walk in there, she's like, Danny, is this your only source of income? Like, do you have another job? I'm like, Chick, what the hell else do we have time to do? She's like, well, like, I know you make good money here, but it's like, how are you spending? And I'm like, I've been able to save a lot of money recently. She's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, you know, I just pinched a penny here and there. In my head, I was like, I wasn't paying rent. My rent was gas. Like, let's just say, like, that car insurance and rent was the same cost for me because I was living out of my car. And so she's like, hey, well, here you go. And she slides me a key to an apartment. She's like, I co-signed an apartment with you. She's like, I look back at the cameras. You've been sleeping in your car for at least 3 weeks now. You've been coming in, great attitude. She's like, I think you need a good night's rest in order to become a manager. Waterworks, bro. I'm like, I'm not crying, you're crying. My eyes are sweating, right? And so I look at her, bro, and she just saved my life from there. Like, she immediately became, like, y'all read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad? Yeah. At that point, like, right before I did that, I met my rich mom. and I met my rich mom, and it was probably the most life-changing occurrence I ever had, because that was the first time that someone had invested in me instead of asking me for something. Like that was I feel like, I don't know what it feels like. I wish I could tell you, but like I'm very spiritual now, and at that time there was nothing, but I guarantee you, like God was definitely present in that room at that day. Like he allowed me to finally slow down my life for 1 second and just enjoy the goddamn. And that's where a lot of this tattoo comes from. Because I was going through a hard time in my life, to make the story short, and like he always talked about like stop and smell the roses, and like it was always just head down, do the job, don't make friendships, don't get attached, just do the job. And he's like, bro, just stop and smell the roses. So whenever I get aggravated, I usually just look at my tattoo. First time I've ever said that out loud, but after that, it was like this business became my everything. And so if you ever see me passionate or intense, it's genuinely because like I know how much this business saved me. So it's very frustrating when you don't let it save yourselves. And so I met Richard, and that's when I met my rich dad. He showed me how to use God through the business. He showed me how to do life. He showed me how to be a better future husband, a better brother, a better son, and everything like that. Like I was very resentful towards my family before I met Richard. And he's like, hey, like, you ever get mad at he said this quote, and I was like, bro, that is the stupidest quote I've ever heard. He's like, you can't get mad at a sheep for not knowing how to be a lion. What the fuck are you talking about, Richard? He's like, you can't blame a sheep for not knowing how to be a lion. He's like, you can't blame your family for not knowing how to become successful if you when they were never shown how. I'm like, damn. And he's like, and another thing is like the lion doesn't care about the opinion of the sheep. Rawr. Okay, so I immediately met Richard, and then somewhere along the way, I also met the love of my life, and I got to the business, and so December 21st was when I got promoted to assistant manager. Right, December 21st, and my first day of sales in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, was in February 7th. Those 3 months my first 3 months of business were probably the hardest months of my entire life, and not because anything was hard. It was genuinely, I was making the most money I've ever made in my entire life. The business was booming. I was the talk of the town, right? We were doing really well, but it was like it was finally time to say bye and like go away from what finally became comfortable. Like I moved away from Texas, moved away from Richard, moved away from Shane, and it was probably the hardest thing I've ever done in my life, guaranteed. And I feel that again, living the city now. And so with that being said, we started the business with 3 people, so me and 3 other people, so 4 in total. And after about 30 days, we're at 24 guys. The business was able to save about $65,000 the first month. And we did about the same numbers on the second month too. And since then. And any of y'all know Winston-Salem, the actual city of like Winston-Salem? Raise your hand if you actually know Winston-Salem. Okay, cool. It's as big as this room. So we were doing the water campaign, and I get a call, and it was from Joy, who was a program manager. She's like, hey, you are doing too many sales. You're only allowed to do 120 sales a week. What? Like, the clients cannot keep up. Like, that sounds like a personal problem. I'm like, we're going to keep doing it. So I would have to send, at the time, I would have to do 120 sales from Thursday, and then Friday and Saturday, we'd have to go to Greensboro to do sales. Right? And at that time, we also got kicked out of our office because we were so loud. So I ran my office out of a park for about a month. Think about showing up at a park. And I'm running this opportunity meeting. And I'm like, you're going to make $100,000. Now go have your one-on-one on the goddamn seesaw. Yeah, so it was like, and so I get a call from Ken Weinrop, and they're like, hey, Danny, you've been crushing it. We were able to give you the Raleigh market. Where the hell is Raleigh? They're like, well, it's the capital. I'm like, the capital of what? They're like, North Carolina, dumbass. I'm like, my bad. You told me Winston-Salem, so I only look at Winston-Salem. Right, so I look at the map, I'm like, wow, that's bigger. So we move 11 people over to Raleigh, and we get Raleigh May 26th of 2021. 2022. Yeah, May 26th of 2022. And right then it was off to the races. Like we got a building, we got kicked out of that one too. We were so loud. We had, what was our neighbor? Where's Brianne? She's the only one that remembers that office. It was like the worst scenario. Like we had like it was a sleep therapy. A sleep therapy office right next door. And they were open from 10:30 to 1. At most. we had a snap back then. Like we were like, woo! It was like, I give it up for this dog, and we're like, woo. This bed, and we're like, Sebaka. You know? And it was like, and then we're like, instead of high fives, we'd have to give like snaps. And sometimes the snaps, if you sync them up too well, they're like, shh, like you can hear it. I'm like, oh god. So we got kicked out of that office, and then we finally found this one, and it's been a blessing ever since. We were the first office ever outside of Richard's organization to ever do 300 sales in a single week. And then November we had promoted we promoted Alexis, who was no longer in the business, but definitely made her worth out of it. Definitely love that girl for sure. And so, with that being said, we switched over to the Verizon 5G campaign, and that was probably another big trial and tribulation for me, because in water it was like, hey, push. Like it was like, you don't want water, and they're like, I think I'm okay. I'm like, you don't drink water? They're like, well, yeah, I do. I'm like, well, then go get your fucking card.
Question.
And you do that with internet. What are you getting? You're getting doors. You're getting you're soft selling me. I'm like, bro, I'm like, skip however many months you want. I don't care. Right? And there was no compliance whatsoever. We've grown so much as a company, and to keep the negative short, because apparently negatives go down. To keep the negative short, like we switched over, and I immediately realized that all of my team was so soft, because now we were selling something that actually took genuine skill to do, and we had iPads other than clipboards, so people were like, we're official now, so they got entitled. They're like, we got leads. Back then it was like, sell. And they're like, well, where do we go? I'm like, the streets.
Over there.
And I'm like, over yonder. Like, we got kicked out. I'm like, tell the property manager to fuck off and go back. Right? So like, we've definitely lived up. Like, it was not pretty when we first started. Okay? We just accidentally made a lot of money. And so I remember, I'll never forget, we were at 35 people in my office, and we dropped down to 6 by December 17th, the day before my birthday. I'll never forget it. We sent 6 people to the field, including me. Andrew was one of them. Miriam was one of them. Who else was one of those people? Oh, that's it. Yeah.
No, I was there.
Oh, Porto, you were there.
Yeah.
And I remember running this meeting. I remember like miserable out of my goddamn life. Like, I was so frustrated because I'm like, I'm letting my parents down. And when I say parents, like my rich dad and my rich mom, I'm like, I'm letting them down. They gave me this opportunity. They invested in me. And I have 6 people going to the goddamn field. And I'm like, God, I think I might fail this business. And that was the first time I ever thought I was going to fail the business. At the time, we had lost, I remember I had lost like maybe $40,000. I had lost $40,000, and I was like, what the fuck am I going to do? I'm going to go into retrain. My parents were right, blah, blah, blah. My parents with me, I was already made up, but I was like, my parents were right. Everything, I'm like, what am I? And everything, like usually when adversity hits, your brain starts to justify every negative thought you've ever had. And you're like, I knew this was too good to be true. Or I knew that blah, blah, blah. Maybe the business doesn't work. Every loser thought I could have at that exact moment, I had it. And then 8:30 hit around, and these guys would walk in, and like, they were good, but they were bad, and it was just because it was my fault. Like, they were not getting developed because I'm like, they're kind of one-on-one. I'm like, bro, what do you want a one-on-one for? What do you need me for? Go learn it yourself. Because I had no belief that I could get these people to the next level. And I'll never forget that again. I read this book that changed my entire life, and it was called Wild at Heart by John Eldridge. And if you're stuck in a place where you just don't know how to get to the next level, I definitely recommend that book. Wild at Heart, and it changed my life forever. And immediately, I called Richard and I said, hey, I'm going dark. You'll see me in 90 days, and this office will change, and I'll be your best leg in your entire organization. And I'll never forget, from those 90 days, we really hired Andrew and Porto at that time. Like they were in the office, but they weren't in the office. because I was barely in the office. Like it was like leaders meeting was started at 8:30. We were done by 8:34. And I'm like, okay, go, fuck off. I'll see you at 10. And then I would just leave, bro. And I would sit in my car and like cry. And I'm like so frustrated, so irritated. I lost $40,000. I don't know what to do, and I gotta run this office. And like it was like the circle was like, I'll never forget it. You remember it, Andrew? But it was like I'm like trying to build energy, and like there's a circle around them here. Like this is the circle, bro.
Hey, go.
Like guaranteed, it was like literally like right here. It was literally this. I'll never fucking forget it. I remember it. I'm like, you know what? Group up. And I'm like, you know what? Everyone sit the fuck down. And I sit everyone down. I'm like, look at this board. I'm like, there was one car going out to the field. One car. Like, look at what it is now, and look, there was one car going out to the field. And I'm like, this shit will not happen again. I'm like, we are gonna work every goddamn Sunday. I will be out there in the field pushing everything I gotta do. We will never be a loser office again. And I'll never forget it. It's not there no more. No, it is. It's behind that paper. But I printed out where we were on the tracker. We were 52nd in the country out of 54 offices. I'm like, we will never ever be this low on the tracker again. I'm like, you see that board? I'm like, if you don't want to build a company, get the fuck out right now, because we're gonna build it, and that's what it's gonna take. And if you want to be a part of that, I 100% understand. I'll write you a badass recommendation letter, but get the fuck out right now because we need to build something worth having. And it just felt like we went dark, and we went dark hard. Like it was intensity from like there 90 days later, right? Andrew got to level 2, Porto got hired, Josh got hired, Amber got hired, Tia got hired, Hassani came and joined the business, Miriam finally talked, right?
Smiled.
Sharon joined the business. Who else got hired from December to like March? There's
Dylan? Wasn't Dylan here in like March? Or was he here like April, May?
He came for like, yeah, you talked about Dylan. But it was like,
Yeah.
Sharon and, it was really like Sharon, Miriam, Hassani, and Tia. They all got hired around February-ish. And February was like our 85th day mark. And then like in 5 days, it felt like I came into the office and I was like, what the fuck? Like it was exactly like that. It was filled. And I looked at Hassani. I'll never forget this conversation. Where's Hassani? I'll never forget. Me and Hassani were sitting on those green chairs, and I looked at him. I'm like, we got a #1 office. He's like, well, we're building. He's like, well, we built right now. Like we can really cook. Esther was here too.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. She left on good terms. She's just having a baby. She's
Thunder is doing super.
God's gonna bring her back. Okay.
That's his
And
name.
so yeah, and bring him a better name too.
That's his name.
And so what you call it? Bolin Thunder.
Yeah, Bolin Thunder.
And so I looked at him. I'll never forget the story. I look at Hassani and I'm like, bro, we got a #1 office in the making, and it felt like, what is that? We went from 120 sales to the next week we did 250, and then 250 went to 286, and 286 went to 300, and 300 went to 320, and 300 went to 356, and 356 went to like 380. And I'm like, yo. We were making money hand over fist. Like it was like if you made less than $1,000, fuck you. Like it was crazy. And we're getting back to that point because what I didn't realize on the back end, they didn't tell us, we had just gotten brand new leads. And like second tranche is coming in December 1st, and it's gonna happen all over again. And Hassani was the maker of that. Tia was the maker of that. Andrew was the maker of that. Miriam was the maker of that. Porto, all these people, y'all definitely helped build the business. And I remember looking at myself in the mirror, I'm like, wow, I'm the reason why my team is failing. Like, it is literally just me. I'm like, I'll never forget, I'm like, Richard, I really need you to come to North Carolina. And he's like, well, I'm going to Charlotte, so take all your guys. And it's so funny because I remember everyone being the happiest everywhere, but I was so goddamn miserable at the time because I had no belief in myself still. And Richard looks at me and he's like, bro, you're going to get to NC off of this team. And raise your hand if you went to go see Richard that one time. Yeah, and Brianne's still there, Miriam was there, Hassani was there. I don't think we lost anyone from that crew that went to go see. Who was it? Lily. Yes, we lost her.
Oh, no, and Whitty, because Whitty went too.
Yeah, Whitty should not have been there in the first place. Yeah, we lost one. But it was like, they met my upline and And Richard looks at me, he's like, bro, you got an NC team cooking. He says, this is the crew. He's like, I'll never forget. He's like, seeing them, the way they talk to each other, the way they hang out, the way they do it. He's like, this is the same thing I did when I saw that it was like me and all the guys that we got promoted with. And Richard was like, Richard promoted 18 offices in about 20 months. Okay? He's like, hey, in the next 8 months, you're probably going to promote around 6 to 7 offices. 2 are going to likely fail. He's like, but those 5 are the reason why you get to national. And for the first, I remember taking a step back and I'm like, God damn, like I didn't stop to smell the roses again. And I remember just praying that day and I was like, wow, like we can definitely make it. And from then on, like the culture has never been better, right? I remember looking at Asani, I'm like, bro, the culture just isn't what it is anymore. And then we met Richard and I'm like, shit, I was the one ruining the culture. Like I was so stuck up, I was such a stickler for the rules. I was so caught up in like, do it my way. And I'm not perfect, guys, whatsoever, right? Like I said, along the way, we've attracted some great people, godly people, and I'm just so glad with where we're leaving the office. Like there's no one I would trust more to leave the office than Hassani. And I know raise your hand if you're a leader and you're staying in Raleigh and you're on the president side. Like he's gonna fuck up, guaranteed. Like he's gonna mess up so much. It's gonna be crazy. Right, and if you want to curse him out, call me. We'll curse him out together. Genuinely, right? But to be honest, like I think we can all agree we have no doubt this guy's gonna make it, right? He's a walking NC, right? In the making, and he's so hard on himself. So like the one advice I have for you is like just tell him to stop his smelling roses sometimes, okay? Because he's gonna fuck up and be hard on himself. And he's gonna be a million places at once, but just see how you can definitely just be in the same room as him because he's stirring up something good here. In San Antonio, we're gonna go and stir up some more. Like there's no one I would trust to open a business with more than the guys we got opening up, specifically Tia, Delaney, and Trevor, right? Like these people have definitely paved the way, right? Like they carried the office when I couldn't, and when I had low belief, like bro, like this crew is something different. Like let's be honest. Like this team, like, we're not saying this shit about McDonald's. Like it means this guy really helped me when I couldn't drop the fries. Like no, like this office, it just has something better. And it's like what makes this office so special is like, bro, like I just know each one of y'all's hearts, and y'all are a good-hearted person. Like maybe you're not as sappy as I'm being right now, but you just want something fucking more than running with water on your shoulder barefoot, wondering what the fuck you're gonna do with your life. Like my worth was how many times I can impregnate my wife in 20 years. That was my worth, right? And it's like I couldn't. I had to die in my family's eyes in order to live in my own. And if there's one advice I have for you, we can open it up for Q&A really quick. But it's like if there's one advice I have for y'all guys, it's like, bro, go dark. Like just put your fucking head down, put your faith up, and just work until you don't recognize yourself. Right? And just work. And it's like, bro, like if you don't have what you want, it's because you don't have what you need yet. And it's like you're gonna learn something in the next 2 weeks that is gonna change your goddamn life. Like just let the business change you. I've seen Hassani when he came in. When the Hassani that was here now, bro, like he was wearing white socks under his black shoes before this. Okay? Right? Like this guy did not know much, and everything. The reason why he is where he is today is because he was just the best student I've ever seen come into the business. He is the best student ever, and he's intense, hands down. Okay, sometimes needs to be less intense, but like he's gonna mess up, and like you are gonna go through trials and tribulations. And the number one thing that can ruin this culture is that if you let the thought leave your mouth, saying like, well, Danny did this, that's when the culture starts fucking up. Like when the culture starts fucking up is when you start comparing my 19 months, my trials and tribulations, my hardest times to his beginnings. Because if you compare Hassani's first time to my first time, you would be like, I don't want to open up with Hassani. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. And it's like, if you're staying here, bro, you have something good here. Like this is a good business. And there's good money in this business.
It's a good business.
Good. Does that make sense? Like we have something stirring up here. Like hopefully like I provoked some thoughts. Hopefully like I got through some thick skin. But it's like, bro, like I don't know how to say it. I've seen a lot of offices come and go. Like I've walked into an office before and I'm like, wow, it feels sad in here. Like it feels miserable. And I walked into this office every day for the last 9 months of my life and been grateful and blessed to bang on some doors with y'all, bro. Right? And it's like, now I'm off of the field, but it's like, there's not another day that passed by that I wouldn't go and do it with y'all again. Right? And it's like, I know I haven't been perfect along the way. I know I pissed y'all off. I pissed off Asani more than I pissed off any of y'all, for sure. Right? It's like, you're gonna get in fights with your upline, you're gonna get in fights with Asani. Okay? Right? You're gonna get in fights with tons of people, but the number one thing is like, just don't forget that it's like, bro, this is a training program. You ever mess up something when you're training? Okay, cool. Have some grace in your heart. Does that make sense? Just have a thick skin and a soft heart. Make sense? All right, let words bounce off your skin, and let emotions pierce your heart a little bit more. Cool?
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have any questions for me? Whether about my story or the business or like my lowest times. When I tell you my lowest times, guys, it's like you can get out of it if you're like if you're tougher than your tough time, you're gonna be fine.
I have one very important question.
You can ask any questions. There's no off the wall questions for sure. Okay, like any like very very serious questions y'all have, I'll definitely answer. For sure. Okay, cool. Go ahead.
Can you send me the video so like when I feel down, I can watch it all the time?
Kind of what?
Send this video to me.
Absolutely. I'll post it on YouTube.
Thanks. Like ASAP.
Send me a chat.
Absolutely. Do you want to stop it right here? We'll do the Q&A. That we can answer like actually.